Hello again, and welcome back to Celtic Connections. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the Irish Classical Theatre Company. It's a little bit of a shaggy dog story, but bear with me because it's actually the true story. Chris and I, brothers, back in Ireland, we had both attended the Abbey School of Acting, and then we went on to join the Abbey Theatre, which is the National Theatre of Ireland, with which I toured the world. And then I went off to Paris and studied mime with Marcel Marceau for 3 years. Meanwhile, Chris somehow acquired a theatre back in Dublin in the suburbs, in Dublin 4, a little area called Ballsbridge. So when I came back from Paris, my brother had a theatre, which is an actor's dream, of course. So I ended up running the theatre company with my brother. We also ran a school of acting out of there, the Oscar School of Acting. We ran a mime company, Oscar Mime Company, and every summer we tour around Ireland with a small troupe. So we were used to working very, very closely together. So it was more or less inevitable that when we got to Buffalo, we'd end up working together, as we have with the Irish Classical Theatre Company, along with Jim Ward and Josephine Hogan, the other two co-founders. So how it all happened was, in 1985, we did a production of Beckett's Waiting for Godot in a tiny little pocket theatre called The Focus in Dublin, just 70 seats. And it was a huge success. The director, Peter Sheridan, who was here a few years ago, he directed Being Behan. His brother, who's better known, Jim Sheridan. Jim is a movie director. He's Oscar nominated for My Left Foot. He did In the Name of the Father, in America, a whole bunch of movies with Daniel Day-Lewis. But back in those days, he was running the Irish Arts Centre in New York, which also has a small theatre. So Chris called him and said, can we bring your brother's production of Godot over to New York? And he agreed, so we packed our bags. But then we discovered that the rights were not available for New York City. So we had to change of plans, and we went to Rochester instead, to Nazareth College. And we applied for visas. They were turned down, working visas. So that did not deter the bold Chris O'Neill. So he applied then for amateur visas. We weren't going to be paid anyway. So we came here as amateurs with Waiting for Godot. We did it at Nazareth College in Rochester. One of the Townsell family, probably Kevin Townsell, saw it and invited us to do it at his hotel, the Airways Hotel, now defunct, out beside the airport in Buffalo. So we did it. It was the middle of a blizzard, and we did it downstairs in the dining room because he didn't have a theatre. And we slept in sleeping bags. We weren't paid, but we got a lot of Guinness and a lot of chicken wings and good Buffalo food. So we did the show, and Terry Doran, who was then theatre critic for the Buffalo News, he came out and saw it. I never saw the review, but apparently he said, if you have to mug your grandmother, make sure you go to see this production. So one of the people who came to see it, a lot of theatre community in Buffalo came to see it. This was way back in 1985, was David Lamb of the Cavanokie Theatre. And David and Chris knew each other from Trinity College in Dublin. And they got chatting over a pint after the show one evening. And David said, would you ever consider Chris staying in Buffalo? Now, Chris was running from the taxman in Dublin, so this was an invitation that Chris couldn't refuse. So he stayed on in Buffalo. I went back to the Abbey. And 5 years later, there was a visa program called the Donnelly Visa Program. And Chris applied for it 72 times. And I applied for it once. And Chris got it 3 times, so he stayed on legally this time in the States, in Buffalo. And I didn't get it, but years later they did a random computer selection, and my name came up. So I was offered a visa to come and live in the United States. And I said to Josephine, and we had a baby daughter at the time, Laura, we said, let's do it for 6 months. We'll give it a shot, give it a try, see what happens. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So we came over, again in the middle of a blizzard. It was December the 29th, 1989. And a local actor, a madman called Mikey Carr, collected us from the airport. And we should have known right then and turned back, but we didn't. And to make a long story short, a year later, we formed the Irish Classical Theatre Company. We were on a patio just off Elmwood Avenue near Forest there. It was Chris, myself, Josephine, and Jim Ward, who was an Irishman, local psychiatrist, worked at the Psychiatrist Centre. And we all put $200 in a hat and we said, let's start a company. So Chris and I got together with Joe and Jim, and we started the Irish Classical Theatre Company. We didn't have the money to put a show on because even in Buffalo, you can't, even in 1985, you can't put a show on for $600. So good old Saul Elkin, who was chair of the Department of Theatre and Dance at UB, he gave us the Pfeiffer Theatre, which they owned at the time, now the Town Ballroom. He gave it to us for free to put a show on. Darlene Pickering-Hummert said she'd do the publicity for free. And it's a one-man show called Joyicity on the life of James Joyce, which I do. So the actor was free. Chris said he'd redirect it. The director was free. Josephine did the box office, which she had done for the original Godot in Dublin. So it was really a family affair, and we did Joyicity. It was a big hit, and we made enough money to do another show. The next show was Faith Healer, with all three O'Neills in it by Brian Friel, and we did that at the Pfeiffer too. So with these small beginnings, we built the Irish Classical Theatre Company. Now we have done just under 200 productions in about 7 different venues. The next phase, we were doing shows at Damon Theatre, at the Pfeiffer, wherever we could get a space. We met Mark Goldman. Mark Goldman was trying to get the Calumet Arts Cafe off the ground in the red light district, Chippewa Street, which it was then. And he asked me, would we do a show there on Sunday evenings to entertain his dining crowd? And we said, sure. So we did a show about an Irish marriage called The Galway Girl by Geraldine Aaron, featuring a married Irish couple, Josephine and Vincent. And again, audiences loved it. We were supposed to do 3 shows. We ended up doing 3 months. And then we did a Shaw two-hander. Then we did a Fado farce called A View with a Room, directed by Fortunato Pesamenti. And Mark said, I want you to stay. He had a delicatessen next door in the Calumet building. He said, can you make a theatre in here? I looked at it, impossible. All these huge refrigerators, 2 supporting pillars, no space for a stage. And I invited a gentleman called Patrick Shaughnessy, who was a professor of design at Buff State. He came and he said, you know, Vincent, what you got to do is to put the actors in the centre and put the audience in a circle around the edges. This was a completely novel concept to me, called theatre in the round. So that's why Irish Classical is in the round, just because we could fit 100 people in the round. We could only fit 60 people in, and the economics dictated that we go in the round. After 5 years, we outgrew our audience in the Calumet, and we were looking for a new space. I had the good fortune to meet Larry Quinn, who, amongst many other things, was involved in construction. Frank Maguire, who is a major patron. They were pals. And Larry found this space. We looked at 30 different spaces. He found this space where I'm sitting right now, the Andrews Theatre. Back then, it was just a facade facing Main Street, like a movie facade, nothing behind it, just a field. So we were in the Bayou Brew Pub, I think it was called, next door. We came around the back and we looked at this field, and Larry said, this is where your theatre is going to be. So we raised money with Calvin Rand, Ed Linder, a whole group of friends, Frank Maguire, of course, and we raised, I think it was 1.3 million, and we started building the theatre from the ground up. First time in, I think, 50 years in Buffalo that a new theatre was built from the ground up, the Andrews Theatre. So we've been here 20 years now, and 5 years in the Calumet, 3 years in the Wilderness. We've been around actually 30 years, since 1990. So we came and we're going to stay. I just got to tell you a little story about the opening night of the Andrews Theatre. As I said, in the middle of a blizzard. We had all the receptions next door at the Market Arcade. It was so bad that audiences could not leave the Market Arcade and come next door to the Andrews. So we built a tent from one building to the other so they wouldn't have to face the elements. I remember there was an ice sculpture. It was so cold, the ice sculpture stayed for a month without melting. So that'll give you some idea of the conditions. The set designer abandoned us. He fell in love with a girl in North Carolina 3 days before we opened. No set. The Andrews ran off and they found wicker work in the old Studio Arena storage area. So we did the whole thing with wicker. Ken Shaw, we weren't ready to open. He got a bunch of friends from the theatre community here. That's what I love about the Buffalo theatre community. They stayed up for 24 hours getting the theatre ready. And we opened as if there wasn't a problem in January 99. So like I say, we've been here 20 years. We've done brunch theatre, we've done lunchtime theatre, we've done cabaret theatre, late night theatre, touring theatre. We've done a little bit of everything. So I've been AD for 30 years. I'm passing the baton to a brilliant young woman called Kate Loconti Alcacer. You'll be hearing from the Celtic Connections after the next one. And the next Celtic Connections is going to be with somebody outside of the original four who made probably more difference to the Irish classical theatre and to its artistic standards than any other individual. The first show I did here was the Scottish show, Macbeth. I was playing Macduff. It was in the nuclear bomb shelter underneath the Central Library in Lafayette Square. And I was a smoker in those days. And we came out at the intermission in all our kilts and the whole bit. And we saw this man coming up Broadway. We met on Broadway, if you don't mind, Clinton and Broadway. And he had a shock of hair and glasses, a very intense look. And we got chatting, and he'd seen the show. And he said, why don't we work together? And I won't tell you his name, but I will tell you this. He'll be running the next episode of Celtic Connections. So be sure you tune in next week, Celtic Connections. Same Irish time, same Irish channel.